I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from the great state of New York, Congressman Meeks.
I want to thank the gentleman for organizing the opportunity to say thank you. First, thank you to God for sending us Bill Gray. Thank you to God for having an individual who understands who he was, where he came from, and how he got here, and never forgetting about those least than he. Bill Gray knew what his purpose was in life. Many individuals go through this thing that we call life and never find out what our purpose is. But all you have to do is to look at the works of Bill Gray, and you know his purpose was to serve people who needed a hand up, to serve people who sometimes were forgotten about, to serve people to make sure that their tomorrow was better than their yesterday. When I think of Bill Gray, one of the first things that I was told when I got elected to Congress by an individual who looked up at him, my predecessor, the Reverend Dr. Floyd H. Flake, who said that Reverend Gray inspired him because, like Reverend Gray, Reverend Flake had a large congregation. And he understood how he could take that skill being a minister and help the masses. In fact, I can recall a statement made by Representative Gray when he was appointed and when he was elected the chair of the Budget Committee. They asked him, well, what do you know about budgets? He said, have you ever been the pastor of a Baptist church? And he showed that he did understand budgets and money and how to deal with it. And he did it in such a masterful way. He also understood the world and the global world. Even the last few conversations I had with him was about the world, was about going out to countries, whether that they be on the continent of Africa or right here in North America, whether it was in the Western Hemisphere, and how he could help people, all people, but especially people of African descent, so that they too can rise to see and accomplish all that they could be. So death is always, and I send my condolences to the family, it's a sad thing. But it's when one has had such a stellar life, when one has made the kind of contributions, it's a celebration. It's a celebration that we need to thank God for. And we need to thank the fact that God sent them here so that he could be that bright and shining star for all to see and many to follow. He leaves a legacy for us to follow. We will miss him, but we thank him for his service to mankind. And I yield back.
I thank the gentleman, and I also would like to thank all who have assisted the family at this time, including the United States Department of State, which assisted in dealing with some of the issues around the death of Bill Gray in another country, and I want to thank them. I recognize the gentlelady from California. We have about 20 minutes left. The gentlelady's going to have 2 minutes. The speaker that follows her is going to have 2 minutes, and then we're going to be going down towards a minute and a half from that point forward, in order to make sure that everyone has a chance to make comments. And I reserve the last 4 minutes for myself. Gentlelady.
Thank you. I want to thank the gentleman for yielding time and for leading our efforts tonight to celebrate the life of our beloved Bill Gray. First, want to extend my condolences to his loving wife, Andrea, and his 3 sons. My thoughts and prayers are with Bill's family, his extended family, friends, the Bright Hope Baptist Church family in Philadelphia, and of course the residents of Philadelphia. I know that tonight Bill's friend and colleague, my predecessor and good friend, Ron Dellums, also sends his sympathy and prayers to Bill's family and friends. When Congressman Gray was elected to Congress in 1978, I was a member of then Congressman Ron Dellums' staff. Congressman Gray hit the ground running, became chair of the Democratic caucus, majority whip and chair of the Budget Committee. As the first African American in many of his positions, he was truly a trailblazer and paved the way for many of us to follow. As a congressional staffer, I worked closely with his staff, and thank you so much for recognizing them. I worked with almost every one of them who are here tonight, and we worked so closely on so many issues, especially education and his efforts with Congressman Dellums to put the United States on the right side of history relating to sanctions against then racist apartheid South Africa. Congressman Gray treated staff with respect, and he valued their counsel and their hard work. And so I know that all of Congressman Gray's staff, former staff, those who are here and others, mourn his loss and send their sympathies. In recalling so many wonderful memories of Bill, one stands out for me like no other. In 1980, Congressman Bill Gray led a congressional delegation to Sierra Leone in West Africa. To participate, it was then the Africa Americas Institute's conference. I was privileged to represent my boss, Ron Dellums, on this mission, and Singleton McAllister, his staffer, was on that visit. And now this was my first visit to the land of my ancestors, and so it was exciting and it was a moving visit for me. On the plane were many dignitaries, including Ambassador Andrew Young. Now, the leader of congressional delegations had input into the menus served on the plane. In Bill's typical way, he decided the delegation should have soul food on the journey to Africa. We had fried chicken, greens, sweet potatoes, macaroni and cheese, and peach cobbler. We visited several countries on this trip, and I was amazed and so proud of Congressman Gray's command of the issues in each country and his diplomacy with African leaders. I had the privilege to worship at the Bright Hope Baptist Church in Philadelphia and learned what a great prophetic and spirit-filled preacher he was. And I also marveled at how every weekend he was in his church preaching. I had many memorable talks with him about religion and politics. He was dedicated to his country, his church, his constituents, and most importantly, his God. And he understood very clearly the importance of the separation of church and state. What an incredible human being he was. I have so many memories that I could share, but in the interest of time, I cannot do that tonight. I'll extend my remarks and put it in the record. But I just want to say that when Bill Gray learned I was running for Congress in '98, he became one of my most consistent supporters and my dear, dear friend. We had many conversations on the phone, many meetings, and I'll always remember his words of encouragement and wisdom. I will miss the Honorable Congressman Reverend Bill Gray tremendously. He touched my life in so many ways, and for that he will always have a place in my heart. May his legacy live. May he rest in peace.
Thank you. I want to yield to the gentleman from North Carolina 2 minutes. And I'd also like to place in the record a number of letters from local elected officials, State Senator Leanna Washington, State Senator Stack, and a number of state legislators, including my own, Vanessa Brown, and J.P. Miranda, and I would ask for unanimous consent.
Without objection.
All right. I yield to the gentleman 2 minutes.
I thank you, Congressman Fattar, for convening this special order this evening, and I thank you for doing so much for so many. Mr. Speaker, I rise to pay tribute to my friend and great American, William Herbert Gray III. I spoke by email today, Mr. Speaker, with a family friend in Cincinnati. Her name is Barbara Bond, whose deceased late husband, Lavelle, was Bill's friend. She informed me that Bill's closest of friends called him Herb, and that Herb always insisted on paying for the meal and telling his friends where to sit at the dinner table. Mr. Speaker, I first met Bill Gray many years ago. He was a dear friend of a mutual friend, Attorney Ralph Stevens of Raleigh, North Carolina, who was also a minister and a lawyer. Bill and Ralph's relationship was very deep. When Ralph passed away some years ago, Bill came to Raleigh, consoled the family, and delivered the eulogy. In fact, when Bill's older brother, Dr. Claude Stevens of Fayetteville, passed away, Bill chartered a flight from Washington to Fayetteville and then flew back to Washington. He was that type of human being, compassionate and caring for his friends. On Monday of last week, June 24th, Bill Gray telephoned me to say that he wanted to meet wanted me to meet the former ambassador to Morocco. I agreed, and we met at noon the following day in the members' dining room here in the Capitol for a delightful one-hour meeting. During the meeting, Bill reminisced about his days here in the House of Representatives and talked about his work as Majority Whip. He reminded me, Mr. Fattah, that he'd never lost a vote during his tenure. But he went on to talk about how Democrats and Republicans worked together on the big issues of that day and solved problems. And he mused about how that approach to governance would be so valuable today. Bill also reminded me that when I was first elected in 2004, he and Andrea invited me to their Virginia home to meet CEO Michael Dell of Dell Incorporated. Well, Mr. Speaker, as we departed from the lunch last week, Bill gave me a big hug and said something that men generally don't say to other men. He said to me, "Butter, I love you, man," and we walked away. Well, Bill Gray, we loved you, and we'll celebrate your life and your work. To Andrea and the entire Gray family, I extend to you my warmest condolences as you reflect on the life and work of your loved one. May God bless each of you. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Bill Gray, for myself and my wife, for my parents, for tens of thousands of Philadelphians, he was just a wonderful human being who did so much to help so many. And I think it is appropriate that the Democratic leader has come to the floor and to address us on the occasion of recognizing the service of someone who she served with. And they were great friends. And so I now recognize the gentlelady from California, the Democratic leader, for as much time as she may consume, but I'll yield her 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I thank the gentleman from Philadelphia for yielding and for giving us this opportunity to sing the praises of a great man, Chairman Bill Gray, Democratic Whip Bill Gray. Mr. Speaker, I had the privilege just a few weeks ago of receiving a call from Bill Gray. And I said, oh, it was just out of the blue. We wanted to know how my family was doing, challenging my husband to tennis, as always, telling him, was he ready to get beaten by me and this or that. And he said, I just want to know how things are. And he asked me how things were going here and the rest, just a call of friendship. And it was just so remarkable to me that about 2 weeks later, we had the word. He told me he was going to Wimbledon. He was taking his sons to Wimbledon. He was going to go, loved tennis. And then when we got the word, it was just so strange. And I felt that God had really, truly blessed me because I had that opportunity to speak with him just out of the blue and within a matter of weeks before his passing. I did have the privilege of serving with him. As I look around and see all these much younger members, maybe they didn't all serve with him, but they knew of his great leadership for our country. Anybody who did serve with him or knew of the leadership of Bill Gray knew that he was, in a word, a giant of Philadelphia, a giant of the Congress, a giant of our country. He was a leader and a trailblazer, a proud representative of the people of Philadelphia. He just loved his district, a man who left his mark on the history of his city. His name in Congress was an extension, his time in Congress was an extension of his family business, public service, serving the community, acting on the values of his faith, giving back to his neighbors and the less fortunate. Others have spoken about how he made this choice. This is a man who could have done anything in life. He had the talent, he had the stamina, he had the energy, the values, and the rest. He was a success in anything he strove to do. But he chose the path that his family had laid out for him, ministering to the needs of people. In the House of Representatives, Congressman Gray will forever stand as a member of FIRST. He was the first African American to serve as chair of the Budget Committee, a very big deal. as the first African American to serve as a majority whip in the House. He sounded the alarm not only about the injustices of apartheid in South Africa, but about what America and Congress could do to end it. He broadened the reach of his public service beyond Congress, helping and send more young people to college as president and CEO of the United Negro College Fund, and how excited he was about that. He did everything with gusto, whether it was serving as a member, as a chairman, as the whip, and then to have his values be the focus of his work at the United Negro College Fund. To serve alongside Bill Gray, I'm sure all of my colleagues will attest, was to be inspired by his passion and his commitment, by his focus on the future, and by his belief in the common good. It was an honor and privilege to know him as a colleague, a special privilege for any of us who had that privilege to call him friend. We only hope it is a comfort to his wife, Andrea, whom he adored. I hope it is a comfort to Andrea and to William IV, to Justin and to Andrew, that so many people mourn their loss, are praying for them at this sad time. And, well, he went doing what he enjoyed at Wimbledon. Watching Wimbledon all weekend, all I could think of was Bill Gray being there. So many people loved him. So many people share the grief of the Gray family. All I can say is that knowing him over all of these years, he lived life to the fullest. And though he left us too soon, what he packed into his years of life and service and leadership was something so remarkable, so remarkable. So that's why I thank the gentleman for recognizing Bill Gray, giving us the opportunity to do so on the floor, and to do so with all the admiration and affection that you have brought to this meeting this evening, and all of the voices of our colleagues. I'm sure we'll be saying more and more about Bill Gray. He wasn't into titles. He liked having the titles, that he liked the friendship of being called Bill Gray. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I
thank the gentlelady.
Thank you.
And I thank her for her leadership here in this House and her own extraordinary career that continues as we go forward. I want to yield a minute and a half to the gentleman from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Fatah, and for convening us here and for coordinating this. And I'd like to rise and pay tribute to the memory of Bill Gray. Also, unlike our leader, I never had the pleasure of serving with Bill Gray, but maybe people will wonder why so many people have flocked to the floor to pay tribute to him. We put him in the same category that we put Shirley Chisholm, with whom I never served, or George H. White, with whom I never served, or many other people who came before us, because we stand on their shoulders and recognize that but for the contributions that they made, we would not be here. And I come because Bill Gray was a friend, even though I never served with him. He regularly checked in with those of us who served, just to call and say hello and encourage us to stay committed to the task that we are sent here to undertake. And he regularly checked in with me because he knew I also played tennis and loved tennis, and that I'd been to Wimbledon before. So I guess the great thing about it is that he died in the middle of making a trip to do something and observe something that he really loved, and with a member of his family. So I want to thank Representative Fatah for convening this special order, and extend my condolences to Bill Gray's family. We'll remember him forever and ever. Amen.
I thank the gentleman. And the Sunday after Bill Gray left the Congress, he preached a sermon when he said that, you know, he was chasing his mission. And his mission wasn't money, it wasn't being in the Congress, it was serving people. And he was leaving the Congress to go lead this fine scholarship organization, the UNCF. And he did an extraordinary thing in terms of convincing people of the likes of Bill Gates to write a $1 billion check at one sitting. No one had ever gotten a check that large on behalf of young people in our country to seek an education. Bill Gray had the gift of being a Baptist preacher who was always optimistic. I want to recognize the gentleman from Minnesota for a minute and a half, the gentleman Keith Ellison.
Let me thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, young people often ask, you know, I'm interested in politics, I'm interested in public service. Who might I look at to model myself after? I could think of very few people who would be better than someone like Mr. William Gray, Congressman Gray, Reverend Gray, so many titles that he held. I did have the pleasure of meeting him. Of course, I never served with him, but I did get to know him, and I got to know him in a strange way. He just called me up at my office, and I was like, Bill Gray's calling me, and I was a brand new member. I was just happy to be here. But Bill Gray thought that, hey, you know, you're a member of Congress. I'm welcoming you to this institution and want to have a relationship with you. And I sat down with him, got to know him, and he actually was really spent his time and gave me the honor of his presence on many occasions. And I thought to myself, you know, Bill Gray's an excellent role model because, one, he has a spirit of optimism. He was always, whenever I was around him, happy, smiling, upbeat, believing it can be done. Two, he was never too important, though he was very important, to give his time to people, no matter who those folks might be, even like a freshman congressman like I was when he called me. Three, he's a person who had a certain sense of self-possession. He was sure that making sure that college education for kids was right. And because he was sure that he was right about it, his enthusiasm for the subject kind of infected people around him. Doesn't surprise me that Bill Gates would write the check because he's talking to Bill Gray.
That's right.
And so if you really want to be successful, look and study Bill Gray. Look, none of us are going to be here forever. May we all leave the legacy of a great man like Bill Gray. Thank you very much for hosting us tonight.
I thank the gentleman. It was said by Ben Hooks on one occasion that we're all passing one by one, and we should not get caught with our work undone. And so Bill got his work done. I want to recognize the gentlelady from the great state of New York, Yvette Clarke, who was born on the best day on the calendar. We share birthdays, but she is much more beautiful and brilliant than I. The gentlelady.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to my colleague, Mr. Shaka Fattah, Congressman Fattah. It was a great day, November 21st.
There you go.
But let me just say this. I want to thank you for your leadership. It is very appropriate that we're here on the House floor, a place where Mr. Gray's power was most profoundly felt, and that you, being his successor in office, would lead us through what for many of us is a day of celebration and commemoration of his life. But I'm here to express on behalf of the people of the 9th Congressional District our most profound condolences to the family of Congressman Bill Gray. And as I've said, to celebrate his life and the legacy that he's left for all of us. Trailblazer, man of God, outstanding husband, father, preacher, skilled negotiator, consensus builder, majority whip, and servant leader. These are just a few of the words that describe the Honorable William H. Gray. As a pioneering member of Congress, William H. Gray III was an industrious public servant who worked diligently to provide equal rights, education, and service to the people of his district and indeed our nation. He was a trailblazer for so many who have followed in his footsteps in the House of Representatives, including myself, and paved the way for many more to follow. Congressman Gray represented the 2nd District of Pennsylvania from 1979 to 1991. He was the first African American to become Majority Whip of the House of Representatives in 1989, the 3rd ranking House leadership position. He also served as chair of the Budget Committee of the House of Representatives, the first African American to do so, and was a member of the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Transportation and Foreign Operations. Congressman Gray, along with many of the CBC at that time, led the effort back in the mid-1980s to end U.S. support of apartheid. When Congressman Gray retired from the House of Representatives, he went on to become president and CEO of the United Negro College Fund, where he led the efforts to raise more than $2.3 billion for HBCUs. Extraordinary, and I'm sure my colleagues have recounted over and over and over all that he has done, and I'm just putting an exclamation point because I think it's worth repeating. The people of this nation need to know what an outstanding servant, congressman, preacher, Congressman Bill Gray III, it was, and we miss him dearly. He was passionate about education and believed it was the greatest tool towards a brighter future. And I believe my colleague, Congressman Fatah, must have melded DNA, because certainly, or maybe it's a Philly thing, I don't know. But certainly, I know that this is the legacy that he has left for Congressman Fatah and for all of us to follow. Congressman Gray hails from a long lineage of preachers. Before coming to Congress, Congressman Gray served as the pastor of the Bright Hope Baptist Church in North Philadelphia, where he served as pastor for 35 years. So a real Renaissance man who has been able to manage several careers throughout his lifetime. He succeeded his father, William H. Gray Jr., who preached for 22 years, and his grandfather, William H. Gray Sr., who served there for 24 years. So while in Congress, he returned to Philadelphia on weekends just to preach. He leaves an amazing legacy that will never be forgotten, that will be a part of our nation's history for generations to come. So during this time of grief, I hope that his family and all of us will find solace in our memories, and comfort will be bestowed upon the family and loved ones at this time of their bereavement. I will continue to keep the family and his parishioners and those who have held him dear in my prayers, and hope that the Lord will continue to be with them at this time. With that, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Let me thank the gentlelady. We're going to do a couple of things, and then I'm going to close. First, we're going to ask for unanimous consent for the gentlelady from Ohio and the gentleman from New Jersey to be able to extend their remarks in the record, unanimous consent. And then I would like to yield a minute and a half to...
Their request is covered by